Okay, I think we'll get started. Dr. Davis sends his apologies. He is not able to attend this evening, so I'm here to kind of greet you. Thank you so much for coming. This is meeting 7. We are going to be looking at the aquatic center work that was discussed at the previous meeting. I think they have some amazing things to share with you, and I will turn it over to the folks from Bright.
All right, thank you, Dave. Again, you guys know the song and dance, so we don't probably need to go through this necessarily. Again, hopefully today we leave enough time at the end to spend a little more time on site than the 3 minutes I think we left last time. But we'll see how well we do to get there. Again, as we've been tracking the feedback. I'm going to kind of skip over the previous meetings and jump to meeting 6. I really think as we go through today, I think what you're hopefully going to see is a lot of comments regarding a lot of these. A couple questions. What does community versus student locker rooms look like? That's a pretty detail-oriented thing. But when we look at the plans, we have some of that's starting to identify. We're showing the family changing rooms now. I think we respond to the comment of a kind of a baseline, nice to have better, just in terms of how we looked at it and budgeted it. We talked a little bit about that last time, specific to the, do we go 25 yards or do we do 50 meters? So we started at, I think we're sort of treating that as the good, better, best type scenario. Again, I'll skip over a couple of these specifics. Again, where should the project exist? We'll talk a little bit about that today. Yes to 50-meter pool, yes to splash pad, yes to warm water therapy. So again, you'll see those accounted for here as well. A lot of good comments, I think, about the transportation. So again, that speaks to our location. And again, I don't know that detail will be figured out yet, but I think as we've seen with all of these, if we're going to go to some centralized location, then transportation is going to be pretty key to how the kids are getting there and not getting there. Recreation department information and a good sound system. So we didn't have anything about the wave surfing generator, so we'll work on that.
That's it. No.
I don't know what we had the 3 levels here. The baseline, nice to have, even better, and then that's probably the next one up is the wave pool. So again, I'm not going to go spend a ton of time on the precedents here. We did include a couple of additional ones that were asked to look at, so I'm kind of flipping through. So again, we looked at Oshkosh 20th Avenue, Ashwaubenon, Beloit Memorial, Fond du Lac, Howard Swamico, Verona. And then again, we spent a lot of time, I think, last time talking about some of the 50-meter pools in the state, the Schrader Aquatic Center down in the Brown Deer area. And then I apologize, I skipped over, and then the UW pool as well, the Solder Home, here it is. And then a couple that we talked about last time that we didn't have supporting images that we just wanted to bring back today. One was the current Lena High School. So this is an 8-lane pool with kind of a diving area. This was built in '91. I believe it's about 250 seats. There's just kind of bleacher seating on, I believe, on one of the sides. So kind of estimating, kind of see the dashed lines here. So there's just bleacher seating on the one side. So pretty limited. I don't know if our subject matter experts know the size. I estimated probably 250. But does that seem about right? Again, built in '91. Some additional pictures. And then Awasa South High School is another one that was mentioned. Again, this was built in 2005. What's pretty unique about this one, I would say, is the high seat capacity. So they hold almost 1,500 kids. That's 2 sets of bleachers, again, at the level of the pool deck on both sides. And then this pool is a bit unique in that it both allows for 25 yard as well as 25 meter. within the pool, so that they were kind of strategic about the size. It does have a movable bulkhead, and then they do have the diving boards. In this case, the diving boards dive into the swim lane areas, so some of the challenges with practices happening at the same time would occur at this facility. But again, pretty unique in that this is a probably one of the bigger spectator venues in the state, as far as I'm aware, and I believe they do a lot of the sectionals and maybe even have hosted state here in some form or fashion as well. So again, one nice one to look at. One of the employees in our office is a Waukesha South grad. She said this was built or opened the year after she got out of high school. So, any questions about either of these two? Again, just kind of wanted to bring it back. Any other pools you were thinking about in the state, again, to add, or I think we got them all here?
I just have a question. What's the benefit of having 25 yards and 25 meters? What are meets held at generally?
Essentially, they're 25 yards.
Yards?
The meter would allow us to, extend it a little bit. If we wanted to do a little bit more distance training, you can extend the length a little bit less move and flip turns. You could do some sort of invite with meters versus yards.
But meets, there's no chance the state at some time is going to say, we're going to go to meters instead of yards. Okay. All right.
Yeah, oddly enough, when you get to the 50 meter, it's 50 meters, but yeah, yards versus meters. What is interesting is, and I think the way that we show it when we get to our floor plan diagram, is we did kind of size our sort of competition pool similar to this, so there would be that flexibility if you ever would want to go to it. But yeah, virtually every high school level pool in the state is yards, so I went for, that would be a pretty significant change to add, I think, 11 feet onto every pool.
Right.
A couple more pictures there of Waukesha. Again, you can see that the bleachers here are pretty significant. Again, I'll just kind of reiterate this. There are some kind of challenges with getting warranties because the chemical environment is really horrible on those bleachers. They don't want wet kids sitting on them because it wreaks havoc on the undercarriage for the bleachers. So that's why, again, as you see some of the other options, we're up on a mezzanine level. From a spectator perspective, I believe you can sometimes get a little better angle. Again, being cognizant that we get good viewing angle and we're not missing one or two of the lanes closest to the bleachers. So I think you get a little bit better spectator view from that perched point of view, and also just gets the kind of the seating off of that pool environment, and helps us out with some of the challenges with getting bleacher contractors to install them. Again, want to just quickly go through some of our needs and goals. Again, we talked, this is a shared facility, practice and competition. We'd like to host some invites and sectionals. This is for community use. We talked a lot about providing separate area for diving. We talked about additional amenities, splash pad, warm water therapy, and then some of the goals for generally for seating size based on the different size of pool. So if we are targeting a smaller size pool, maybe 700 to 800. If we go a little bit bigger with the 50 meter pool, trying to get roughly 1,200 in there. We talked a little bit about participation. So we, again, I think our subject matter experts kind of touched on this last time, but this is kind of in general what we're seeing for participation at both high schools. On the competition side, so north roughly 15 girls, 20 boys, and west 30 girls and 40 boys. So I don't know if subject matter experts, if you want to touch on that a little bit more, or that is pretty self-explanatory. And then we also provided some of that information on participation from the rec department. And again, I'm not going to read all of those numbers off. I don't know, I know we do have one of our subject matter experts from the rec department. I don't know if you want to touch on anything regarding participation, or it's kind of...
Yeah, kind of self-explanatory. And the numbers, I guess I would just say, might be skewed one way or the other because a lot of this is coming still pandemic, through the pandemic, so depending on the time frame that the numbers got pulled from.
I guess my question would be, at this size, are these numbers, are we turning people away, or is this, anybody that signs up can generally participate?
It depends on what they're signing up for. You know, certain levels of certain classes might fill, and then there's wait lists, but, you know, that comes down to more also of a staffing issue and just what we're set up to do.
Any questions? Oh, yeah.
So where are where is this stuff held now?
At the high school pool,
Oh, in the summer there? Okay, got it.
year round.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions? All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Nate to talk through solutions. You just gotta turn it over.
All right, so we did look at two options today. The first one being a 25-yard facility. So similar, or actually to what Clint just mentioned, the large pool volume here is set up exactly, or not exactly, but very similar to Waukesha South, where it has the 25-yard and the 25-meter. And then they could be rotated, you know, obviously swimming in one direction versus the other. In this location, you know, starting here in the natatorium, it would go from shallow to deep, and then this large portion down here would be the separate diving well. So in this location, or in this configuration, I should say, we're not considering a movable bulkhead. This would really allow, you know, some sort of line to be put in, and then there'd be a separation that way, as they do have their own well for diving. Looking at a little bit past that, a couple of entrances up on the north side. We are providing 4 locker rooms. In some of our studies, community locker rooms tend to be a little bit smaller than the athletics. We can work that out as we go, but that's kind of how that's being shown, with a centralized control station, so they'd be able to check in and then process through either side, kind of separating maybe more of the public side versus the competition side. On the public side, we are providing a warm water pool and a splash pad. So you think of, you know, the swimming lessons, water aerobics type activity in here, and that splash pad with potential slides or whatever amenities would be desired for that space. On the other side of kind of this pinkish color, which is kind of our corridor circulation of sorts, we are providing for, you know, stairwells, elevator, a spot for potential recreation office, storage, restrooms, concessions. And then, since we have been talking about these spaces as a hospitality piece, having that commons area. So, you know, if there's an event going on a Saturday, they come out through, process, you know, go through concessions if they will, and you could imagine teams or families gathering in there while they wait for their next meet. Another point of discussion, I think 2 weeks ago and then even since then, is a dry spot for land exercises to practice. I think that was kind of termed as a weight room or athletic space. We tentatively held there was a space called weight room. You could imagine that being used for a variety of different things, whether it is small weightlifting pieces that are specific to the aquatics side of things, or if it's just that dry land practice of sorts. More storage specific to the pool deck itself, and then a large pool mechanical space. And then up on the second floor, this is where we had penciled in seating. This is primarily seating for people watching, spectators. And so there's kind of, you see this wall here, which is superimposed from the floor below, would allow roughly 660 seats to view down into the main pool. And then if you think about seating for, you know, parents that want to drop their kids off for swim lessons, things like that, you could carve out a space of, you know, roughly 100 or more seats to look down into this space. Some additional storage up on the second floor, more mechanical space and office space as well. Stairs on both ends and additional common space up here, so as well as concessions. So as you think that you may have opportunity for teams to gather down here, and this could be more family-oriented, something like that. Any questions? Go ahead.
Just double checking. As far as for the announcer, the electronic timing person, the working personnel to meet, would that be deck level or up?
It could be either, but right now I think there's plenty of deck space. Right now there's roughly like 20 feet around the pool. I know it's a little bit like, I don't know, you could say hard to tell from this, but you know, there's a large amount of deck space here if you consider this to be 20 feet.
Is there a way of incorporating that up for a crow's nest?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
just would say we'd rather, because speaking from just experience with having that deck level, swimmers on the deck in the way, you know, it just, that's another added obstacle on the deck.
Okay.
From my standard point of view, I prefer to be up,
Okay.
if that's possible.
Is there an orientation, you know, if swimmers are headed in the north-south direction or up-down direction, do they want to be looking down from the side?
Ideally, you want it where your starting blocks
Yeah,
are.
we're starting, yeah, because I'm thinking that.
That's how we do it now.
Okay, but perpendicular or parallel with them?
Perpendicular,
Perpendicular.
facing down the line of the blocks.
Okay.
Just one of the corners.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You had another question?
I did. You've got the rec office, which, if that's meant to be a pool office, that should be facing the pool, not in the back, the way it's laid out currently. So that's gonna have to move.
Almost like if you swap the controls in the rec office.
Right.
They just swap the two.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to a degree, these are a bit space bubbly, right? But you could imagine, you know, that control space is pretty well sized, so it could function as both or a little bit of shared functionality there.
What is supposed to go into the control room?
Control room is, you know, where lifeguards check in and out, where that person is, you know, they're checking in for swim lessons, and then they're being admitted into the doors. It's kind of like that check-in spot, as well as a viewing spot so they can go and see out, right? So if you know, the lifeguard over here is whistled, attention, you know, they can see what's going on through that room. Any other questions on this one? The next one, pretty similar as far as some of the layouts here on the top portion of the plan. This, however, would be the 50-meter option. Now, this does not have a separate diving well. In this configuration, there would be a plan for a movable bulkhead, so you could section off swim practice versus diving, as well as provide that flexibility for 25-yard versus 50-meter training. And so, yes, incorporating the deep dive into the bottom portion of the pool well. This, like I mentioned, doesn't change a whole lot except for up on the second floor, still providing some of that seating looking down into the warm water pool as shown in the previous option, but then swings the seating over to the long side. So the crow's nest point would still be a point that would be relevant to this comment that would be relevant here. However, by swinging the seating over the pool mechanical storage space and putting mechanical over the locker rooms, that would allow for, I think, just over, well, it'd be like 1,000, 1,100 seats looking down into the 50-meter pool. And then it doesn't have to work that way, but from squaring things off, you know, we could then, I think in this option, the splash pad gets bigger, the warm water pool gets bigger, because the overall pool gets, you know, much longer. That could be scaled back, you know, to be similar size that we had shown in the previous option. It's a little hard to tell, but overall, the entire volume of the building to get bigger in option 50-meter. I think outside of, you know, obviously the additional square footage, it's an additional stair, larger pool mechanical space, and an additional seating capacity in the 50-meter option. Any questions or comments here? Okay. So cost estimates, whatever everyone's interested in. 25-yard facility is coming in right around 32 to 34 million. This includes 12 months of construction and is based off a summer 2027 bid date. So for those of you tracking, we're using that same bid date 2027 summer approach with all of these just from a consistency standpoint. And this building area is just over 75,000 square feet. The second one, 50-meter option, is coming in between 40 and 42.5 million. So roughly, you're looking at $8 million swing to go the additional length. This building area is just under 91,000 square feet. Any questions on the cost estimates? This does include pool equipment, sound systems, everything to give you a fully functional fully functional pool. Okay. So we don't necessarily have to go through these slides, but we did include them. This is the project timing possibilities. Sorry.
Pardon my ignorance, what do you mean by equipment? Like, does that include sound system and equipment?
Equipment, so when you think of, there's special equipment that, like the pumps and the storage water tanks for all of the chemicals, things like that, as well as this would include diving boards, this would include starting blocks.
Pool cover, buoys.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does this project include pool covers?
Yes.
Unless you don't want them.
Any other questions about what's included in the pool? No, it's okay. So the project timing is similar to prior slides. Dave, feel free to jump in at any point. But this kind of overviews kind of where these FAC 2.0 projects could slot in. Could potentially be a part of a referendum in 2026 in the hypothetical sense. Things could slot up sooner, if Bill Gates comes in and writes a check, right? That sort of thing. Anything else?
No, you said it perfectly, thank you.
So outside of Bill Gates, 2026 would be your first option?
Well, we'll take money from anyone,
Sure.
so it doesn't just have to be Bill Gates, Yeah, if Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk want to donate, we're not going to say no.
Yeah, but about 2026, right?
Right. Yeah, that would be the in our view, probably the earliest you could hypothetically go to referendum anyways because of a whole bunch of other factors.
Sure.
Obviously, we're in the middle of building a middle and an elementary school right now, so we want to get that done first.
Dave, if you've answered this already, I really apologize.
No, go ahead.
Let's just say we do this, all of this. When
Okay.
we rebuild West, what will it have athletic facility-wise? Are we gonna have to duplicate? I mean, I don't know, would you actually build a brand-new high school in 10 years without some of these things?
Right.
And then will we get pushback because we just created all of these things in a shared building?
Well, the
I mean, you know what I
objective,
mean?
the objective would be, let's take the pool, since we're talking about the pool today. The aquatic center would be what would serve north and west. So we would not build a new pool, at least unless the community came up and said, yeah, we want even another one. But I find that highly unlikely. What would most likely happen is you would then design west without a pool in it, right? So you'd be able to focus on other pieces. As we talked about with the performing arts facility, right? We talked about keeping and designing around Kimball, for the west site, for example. There is a phase 4, and we don't talk about it much because it's right at the tail end, and that's renovating north. Well, if we went ahead with the fine arts piece, the majority of the fine arts work that's being recommended at the moment is here at north. So if we renovated north, we would do it around that new fine arts facility, which I don't think would be very difficult to do.
To your point, though, I think maybe a question that you're maybe hinting at is, what are the things that we may hypothetically double up on? And if there was a sense of doubling up, and I don't think that's actually happening, is the, for instance, the basketball, volleyball court situation. you would still have a varsity court at a potential new West High. Now, is it 8 courts or 4 courts like we talked about with the indoor practice facility? No, because that's like practice focused, right? But to have 2 or 3 courts, most likely 3, I would say, at the high school level, given the size of the high school, is still going to most likely want to be at a potential new West, including a varsity setup.
But it really doesn't preclude a new West and aquatic center to be in the same complex.
Right.
Correct.
Right, I mean, you could build, let's say the aquatic center came first, and you purchase enough land that a new West would be built in that complex.
Correct.
Whether it's
Yeah.
hooked to it or whatever.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be totally independent in a new, in a site.
No, those options are still open. You're right. Absolutely.
Does that answer your question?
I mean, I just don't see us building a brand new high school in this day and age without a pool and a field house, right? You know what I mean? So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of struggling with like, how do we do both? I don't have the answer, I just.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think, communities like we talked about Nino, right? They're gonna use their existing pool, although we're building a new high school, they're building a new high school up there. Similar scenario, whether it be at Sun Prairie or Verona or some of the other newer high schools going around, if they have a venue that is working for them, the taxpayers, are like, why build it twice? So they are utilizing, potentially current buildings or current infrastructure and not double down.
Fond du Lac's
Yeah.
pool is where Goodrich High used to be, because that's where they built the brand new aquatic center in Fond du Lac. So then when the new Fond du High was built, they didn't put a pool in it. They did put an auditorium in it because they didn't have one of those that they were building.
I just wanted to piggyback kind of what you just said about Fond du Lac, because Julie, we are unique here in Oshkosh, you know that, with the rec department being part of the school district. So when we look at these facilities, there might be an advantage when you're saying, this is full-on community use. It's for our students and it's for the community. It can't necessarily be at one location or another, so it might be at that third location where everybody comes to use it. So I don't think it would be much different than like what Dr. Dunrock said as far as other facilities that are already doing it and have been doing it like that for quite a while now.
Does anybody use the pool during the day, like in gym classes or anything? Besides special?
Demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
And that
So you
would probably
can't
go
really
along.
build West without a pool.
If you wanted to take that out of the PE curriculum, you could.
Right, you'd have to take that out of the
But again,
or transport them to, if it's close enough.
they do for some units.
So to follow up on that, how big a pool would you need if you also had something like this?
Pools being used for PE are pretty much lifetime PE here, if I'm not mistaken. And they really do a lot of water aerobics, so it's kind of shallow-based stuff. So really not a whole lot of space. 25-yard pool is plenty. I guess it depends on how big the population is, how big the class is, all sorts of things, but then you get into staffing it too.
Did you have a question over here?
Nope, it's just discussed. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. All right.
Question, sorry.
Yeah.
What, Dave, when is renovation of West on the timeline?
The earliest we would look at that would be that would require a referendum. Phase 3 referendum would be 2031.
But you mentioned North would be renovated.
That would be after that,
After.
because that's phase 4. And obviously, part of the reason it's phase 4 is North is newer, right?
So I think we got to a good spot here. We'll spend a little time if you want to get together at your tables and work on any questions you have about concept, cost, or timing. Give about 10 minutes to talk through that, and we'll circle back and continue on with site discussions.
Right, so we'll bring things back together. Again, just kind of verifying if we're good with the kind of the scope. Again, I think, I'm guessing if I say which option does everybody prefer, I think option 2 is the one. Again, we talked about the 50 meter satisfying, kind of bringing the two buildings together, satisfying potentially boys having practice on one side and girls having practice on the other side. I don't want to speak for the group, so we'll start with the subject matter experts, just comments and thoughts you guys had. Should I go to a different group? You
Yeah,
guys
draw
want to
straws.
discuss?
The only thing that I could say about the boys and girls practicing at the same time is they're always separate seasons, unless there's talk of combining the season, which I don't think there is, but there is. So that's great. So, other than that, that's really not a big deal to me, but that was my only note.
I think the other thing too is like looking at the cost. We were kind of talking about like, I mean, obviously millions, 34 casual, but if you're gonna spend $34 million to build essentially like the same, just like a bigger, nicer version of the 25-yard pool, it feels like a lot of money, but not a lot of reward, I guess, or like, I don't know if that's the right word, but.
You're not necessarily showing the community we're giving them something bigger and better. What more can you do with a 25-yard pool than what we already have? Whereas when you have something a little bit more flexible, like an option 2, with the 50 meter, with the bulkhead, and being able to do more things at one time or bring in other events that we haven't had before, that's gonna help sell versus we're just gonna build something the same but new.
Yeah, it's kind of going from 2 pools to
One.
One,
With a balcony.
or to 2 pools to essentially, 2 pools combined, right?
Because the greater community is not gonna care about what your pump room looks like, what your storage room looks like. They don't have buy-in to those things that, us as coaches and supervisors and things, those things are important to us to run programs. That's the behind-the-scenes stuff. So we kind of have to make what matters to them really, be important and show. So that's in, your seating, your concessions, your locker rooms. I mean, people want space, people need privacy. We talked last time about family changing rooms and gender neutral changing rooms, things like that. So those are the areas that we need to make sure get incorporated to help sell the project.
Yeah, I mean, I truly was kind of surprised by the pricing when, again, you go from, the 50 meter with the separate diving to the 25 yard to the 50 meter. Again, it is a lot of money to add that, but at the same time, I was like, that's kind of good value. I mean, again, at this very preliminary pricing stage, but I'm like, that's really good value to get kind of a really great facility that, again, doesn't really exist that much in the state. And to have that presence here and that amenity, again, someone has to pay for it. So understanding that, but again, the value aspect of that is really, really appealing. Any other comments from our subject matter expert group? Okay, we'll go here next.
Well, we were looking at the numbers of students who are swimming actively on swim teams, and it's such a small number. It seems like we're building this pool not for them, because the numbers of people using the pool for aerobics or like just general public is so much, the numbers are so much bigger that it's almost like we shouldn't even be calling this high school pool. This just thinking about who we're trying to sell it to or who's really going to make the most use out of it. So we're also thinking about that. It makes more sense to us that the splash pad would be included, one wide pool obviously because it is really more for the community's use. But we're also thinking that maybe the 50-meter pool isn't needed unless we want to host the meets, because what Gordon Hintz and I were talking about last time was that there's like just the bare minimum, and there's the the nicer upgraded version, which is what I think option 1 is, and then there's like the really nice to have, which is option 2, and I'm torn because I can see that some people would say, oh my gosh, that's a great new facility, let's go for it, and other people might say, look at that fancy facility, are you crazy? So I don't know.
I think the other part of that is though too is that pools are expensive. It's not like going out and building, you know, an outdoor softball field or something like that. There's so much that goes into the construction of this building, and it's much different than when we built Pollock Community Water Park, or any other. We were just talking Appleton, you know, built a new pool facility outdoor not too long ago. This is different. You're indoor. Now you've got buildings, and you've got a lot of brick and mortar. You've got a lot of things that don't happen at outdoor facilities. So as soon as you're going inside, everything's getting jacked up, because you need those things for that facility to operate. So just like when you build a home, you're paying for a lot of things that people are never gonna see, but you need them. You know, so that's kind of to me, that's kind of what the toss-up is, you know? I mean, you don't have to necessarily make every little thing, you know, the gold version, but there's a lot of these costs in here that you just can't change. You know, they're fixed costs that come with the project.
Have you guys done any breakdowns of operational costs per year on a 50 versus 25, or how that would look? Utilities?
No, I mean, our company has not done a 50 meter, so we would have to reach out. I think, I don't know, Drew, do you have a rough estimate of what do you know what you pay in utilities a year for either one of your pools?
No, I do not have that offhand.
I've heard kind of rule of thumb, it's around 100,000 a year to run a 25-yard pool. So I would guess you kind of double it for 50, but I don't know if that's exactly true, because I'm sure there's some economy of scale for, you know, having the system. So that's a number I've heard before. But again, it depends how much you use it, and, you know, are you heating it all the time? Do you have a break? That's a number I've heard.
Getting back to the portion of the swim teams with the utilization of a 50-meter pool versus one 25-yard pool, what do we do if WIAA changes and puts both of those seasons in the same time, in the same season? You know, we've had up to 60-plus girls on the high school team. We've had over 40-plus boys on the high school team. I've had over 13 divers on the girls' team at one point. We've had, you know, this is just one school. This is at West. So now you're taking all these. Where are you going to go in one pool? Because now you're going to be, the high school is going to have AM. I'm just trying to figure out the time frame of workouts. You know, because now if you're co-oping, we're having both seasons at the same time. You really need those two pools. You know, if you're trying to build and, you know, bring the numbers back up, I mean, our diving numbers have been down. You know, and like I said, in our Haiti, we had close to 15 plus divers. You know, now you could run another activity in the other end of the pool, clinics going on. At the same time, you may have something else going on. You know, there's room for expansion. But, you know, I'd hate to see if we really had to one 25-yard pool. Because what are we going to do then? Like I said, if we end up,
It would not accommodate all the numbers combined, if that happened.
And I think that's the beauty of this process too. Again, we have the benefit of a little bit of time if they are talking about adding lacrosse, which would spur the men's and women's or boys and girls in the same season. Do you have a general sense of time frame? Is that 3, 5?
Yeah, I think it's in 3 to 5 year range. Lacrosse will be added. The question is, what are they going to do and where are they going to put it? Because if they put it in the fall, you can't have 6 girls sports in the fall. And the one they've been talking about year after year is combining boys and girls swimming, because that's how it is at the college level. And when you look at Title IX issues, they always ask, well, when's the predominant season? Well, they want to follow whatever college is doing. So I think it's a no-brainer. I really do.
We also have a survey, right, from the membership, I think, coming out, and we're going to get some more clarification, I think, this spring from the WIA. We have our annual meeting coming up. I'm sure we'll get an update on some of the results of that. but lacrosse has gained a lot of traction in a short amount of time as a new sport. So, I'm with Craig. I think something's coming, and they've got to spread it out more evenly for the girls especially.
And if you don't plan ahead and you go and you spend all this money on something that's, being short-sighted, you're gonna have a lot of angry people. Because they're gonna say, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you plan ahead? Why didn't you see what was coming down the pipe?
Well, and I liken this discussion to the indoor facility as well, right? Because again, the theory would be to, maybe build one 50 or 60 yard at each building, right? Or combining them together. So again, to some degree, why we arrive at 50 meters is again, kind of the combination of the two. So again, I think part of our goal is to investigate, look at options. I don't know that we need to pick one of these options, but again, as a group, as a team, we've kind of armed the district with a couple different variations of what this could potentially look like. And again, the decision to move forward with this is several years off, so we'll be armed with, I think, more data and better information at that time. So.
Would the 50-meter pool work, given that it doesn't have a separate diving wall?
I think so, because with the bulkhead, you could have dive practice on one side and swim practice on the other still.
And even if it came down to the, scenario of having boys and girls season at the same time, it would just be up to the coaches to schedule practices accordingly. So maybe you have boys and girls swim come at one time, and then boys and, and then you've got diving at a time in the evening or something like that. So there would still be a scheduling logistic to make that work, but it would be a much better option to be able to have both your swimmers all being able to get in the water.
But during competition, you couldn't.
Yeah, you could, because
Yeah,
you
you
probably
could.
could swim 25
You could,
yards.
'cause you swim
If we're
25.
following the college level, they do diving during swimming. If we're following the college.
Yeah, so they could, because that's where that bulkhead comes into play.
Got it.
Is the 25-yard pool 8 lanes, is that like the?
That's what we're showing, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was, thank you.
All right, this group.
We talked also about
Yeah.
50 meters, go big, go future, go.
And I mentioned too, not to offend people, but are we gonna be Oshkosh adequate? Or Oshkosh, for sake of another word, premium? But I mean, where do we stand with that?
Outstanding.
And I think on all of our facilities, and I swim, but I'm not a swimmer, and I have no grandchildren involved in anything here, so I'm just speaking, but it just seems to me a life skill is to know how to swim, up to a premium Olympic-bound swimmer from Oshkosh, or all-star, or all-American swimmer, or college, big-time college swimmer. So I mean, I think we need to have facilities that can accommodate everyone, from someone just learning to swim in the rec department to someone who wishes to compete, and not have to travel to another city to practice in a more competitive pool. So and it's a 50-year opportunity, and we have already gone 14, 15, 20 years beyond where we should be. And so, and it's spread out over time. So I guess I would like to go beyond Oshkosh adequate.
We also talked about making sure that we bring Oshie to the table. We don't want to be burning bridges, but then come referendum time,
I'm sorry, say.
Oshie,
Oshie.
the Oshkosh Y.
Club team.
Thank you. Because they do a wonderful job with the swimmers and produce some really nice swimmers. So we want to make sure that they're collaborators through all this process.
I'm just curious what the thought process is on that. With bringing in a private entity to do what?
So that we're not
With this
competing
process.
with them, just you know, we want to be playing well with the partners in our community. Oshkosh is a small town, really. So if we're building a premium facility, what is the impact going to be on them?
As they move from their competitive, non-school competitive, and then also, are there movers and shaker parents in the ASHI?
So you're talking
help
about-
support the referendum.
So you're talking about like, you know, when they want to do a big competitive meet, currently they go down to Brown Deer or somewhere, they could then use our facility. What
Correct.
would you like in a facility if you were to rent it out from us, right?
That and much more. You know, there are many West and North students that participate in ASHI. You know, how is that going to impact them? And just, you know.
And the community is going to ask. I mean, people in communities do not like duplication services. So if they perceive the Y is having something like this already, there needs to be a story of why does the school district need this and how are you working together? I mean, when you're trying to put that story together, a lot of those swimmers go up through the high schools and could be really good advocates for both programs. A lot of those ASHI kids come to swim at West or North or whatever,
And they come to us as well.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, so we
Yes.
already, I guess that's why I wanted you to delve a little further into your thought process with it, because like what was mentioned at the last meeting, and I don't know if you were at the last meeting or not, but we do also, as far as the rec department is concerned, tend to serve a little bit different socioeconomical background of families. You know, we don't go to the Y every single time we start a program to say, is it okay with you that we run this program? We know they're probably running something similar, and they in turn have done the exact same thing. We'll have a program and the next year, it pops up in the YMCA's guide, and there's no communication. That's just kind of how that works. I will say, however, I think from the standpoint of inquiring, you know, what would be the value to you as a team to have another facility or a facility like what we're talking about in the community, like Ian said, would you use that? Would you come here and host meets? Would that allow you to not have to shut down your pool to your members because you're gonna come over here and use ours? So I guess to me it's more of a, you know, some of that stuff is programming. I mean, you're gonna duplicate, that's just inevitable. You know, but, you know, like to your point with the using the swim meets, or for that
And I think
purpose.
it's a chance too where, as we go towards a referendum, that we have parents who use the rec area for swimming and ASHI, the Y, all in partnership saying, hey, we support this. We support this. We don't, you know, we can work together in a variety of things. We support this referendum.
And I think that's important to do because it's one thing to each organization do a tumbling class and not talk to each other. A $40 million facility that you're asking all of the community to support to be able to pass it. I think that's just a different level of discussion than whether or not you're both doing a tumbling class, you know, for,
Yep.
you know, inside your own existing facilities. So I think that's a different animal.
Well, the other thing I want to bring up too is you talked about having, you know, ASHI involved per se in this. Then you bring in okay, what about UWO?
Mhm.
Their pool facility is very outdated. And I actually, you know, I'm good friends with the coach, and he's talked to me, he's like, you know, what's the deal? You mentioned something that there's talk about this, and I was like, I don't know anything about it yet, but, you know, are you guys building new pool? He goes, it's not in the works for us at all, but could we involve, you know, instead of the Wisconsin Showcase going down to Brown Deer every year,
Yes.
could we host it? Would that be a revenue for us? So, but
The only
great
rule
point
is
is
is trust.
Yeah.
And if you don't have trust of your community partners, even though in the programmatic level, there is some competition. This is we're asking community residents to pay taxes on this. And people who have kids who go to UWO or ASHI are going to be paying taxes for this. So like you said so eloquently, I think it's important that we're all on the same level with this. So
And we look at
that's
the
what I like about
numbers,
partnership.
sometimes I think, you know, if we build it, they will come. You know, I think, how many, maybe, if it looks like I have some kids coming up, my children are gonna be swimmers, maybe I should go across the border to Neenah or something like that, or to either transport them and or move there. Or, you know, I just think people like good facilities, and I think it might enhance people to do that. And we follow grandkids right now, and every place we go, they have 400 or 500 seats. I mean, we're putting on a $5 bill admissions. I don't know how much revenue that brings in, but it's not free seating anymore. And, you know, and to be able to get some of these big competitions to come up the valley.
And I mean, there are, you know, many residents who have not been part of this conversation, and you tell them we want to, build a $40 million pool, they're going to say, well, we just built a new Y, and downtown has a great pool. And, you know, the West Side Y has a great pool. Why do we need another one? They don't understand the intricacies of, we don't even have proper starting blocks or a diving board or anything. They have not been part of the minutia of these conversations, so I think
Not everybody can go to the Y. I mean, we've got to make that, we got to keep that in mind. Not every time, we talked last time about how difficult it is to fill out those scholarship forms even. At this table, anyway, that is, one of the women who was here had tried to help a child she was mentoring fill out the scholarship forms, and it was, the mother didn't have half the, they had to this, and the mother didn't even know what they were talking about. So we really need to keep all of that in mind.
I mean, there are referendums that happen here and in neighboring, so we have to be very careful how we're selling this. And I think the more community partners we have on board,
yes,
advocating for this with us, I think
All right, this table, anything left unsaid?
Oh, yeah, we thought that, it's sort of similar to Jim talking about Oshkosh adequate. We've had big regrets. We're sitting here today talking about regrets because of what we didn't do in the past. And it's very difficult, and I will say, in this community, to be quite frank, it's difficult to get over those conversations. There are people, so, I think if we do all the things we're talking about, start with the best. We have, and again, we certainly do not have any idea, even in 2026, what the world is going to be like. No idea whatsoever. Will we still be dealing with COVID? Probably. Are we?
Yes.
Yes. Going from the health department says. And all the other things that are happening. So I think we should just start to, our feeling is we should just plan for the best and see what we can do. And the partnership with the rest of the community is really important. I think Brian's made that very clear.
I always think back, you mentioned the grant thing, but I always think back, and I always really liked Ashwaubenon when we were doing their pool project. Their city administrator kind of rephrased it. He said, we have a 5-lane pool, and it's not great for our needs anymore, but that's the best and he kind of, again, Ashwaubenon was probably more farm fields maybe than Oshkosh was at that time. And he's like, that's the best those farmers could do at the time, right? I mean, so, again, would we want bigger, better? Yes, but that was, again, I think the best they felt they could do at that particular time. And you guys have lovingly used it and used it well. So I think it's served, its purpose. And again, now it's time to kind of plan for the future.
Well, I told them the story, my original high school, not in this town, was built like It's a Wonderful Life with the gym floor that opened, and it was supposed to have the pool underneath, and they never finished it. There was a door you could open and look down at this big, dark hole that was under the gym floor because they ran out of money and never finished it. And it was a huge regret. And one of the biggest reasons we got a referendum passed to build a new high school when I was a junior in high school. So we got a brand new facility, with a pool. And now I look at my friends' kids in high school who are on the swim team. Like, we never had a swim team, right? So, I mean, and they're doing great competitions in the UP. So I would never, not do it, because oh, we're gonna save this little bit of money. When we're looking at, like, we've already added on 65 million 4 or 5 times, like, at this point, like, let's go. You know, let's just, what's the diff at this point, you know? It's just so huge, it's hard to even comprehend, but to say, like, only do a part or not have a high school with a pool, it just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, you'll always regret it. And it's hard to add on, you know, later, or finish the hole in the ground.
And all of our marketing specialists will not be using the words bigger and better. They'll be finessing that.
Where was that high school?
I liked your word.
It's in Houghton High School in Houghton, Michigan.
Okay, I've never heard of that, so that's probably a good thing they never built that.
I don't know what that does to your gym floor to have a pool underneath it. It probably was bad. So I had to look it up. So that building was built in '24, and we got a new building in '89, '90, somewhere in there.
So one of our group members is flying solo back there. I'm not gonna let you off the hook, sir. Anything to add?
They're all alone.
You could join us.
I mean, are we talking about, so $130 million in referendum, right? Between all three
If we add,
projects?
if we add everything up.
What was the year that we were talking about here?
27.
At the soonest, I think that's when we think we can start to take some of these off, potentially.
By themselves, they'd be the largest referendum in pretty close to state history.
Oh, it won't be anywhere near the largest referendum in state history.
Oh, no.
$130 million?
Yeah,
Oh, no.
no, Racine's got that at how much was it, Drew? $1 billion?
Try Brookfield.
Yeah, $1 billion, so.
Try Brookfield.
Maybe the 500.
Yeah.
I mean, I just.
What was Nina?
Well,
Nina's
it's a big
just-
ask.
Nina-
It's a
The
big
marketing
ask.
side of this is going to have to be really thought out,
Right,
especially if you're going at the same time.
right. Well, and that's where one of the points that I think is interesting listening to you that we have to realize is we're also potentially replacing the 2 pools with this. It's not like you're leaving the 2 in place and this. You know, so that's part of, I think, where some of you have commented, do you want to make it capacity enough to be able to handle that? I do think it's probably important for us to, at least in our calculus, consider the fact that if they put the male and female seasons together, you know, I mean, because it sounds like there's a good chance of that one. So I do think that's something that at least has to be discussed.
There's a pretty strong Special Olympics swim team that practices at UWO. And they've gone on to have those same swimmers swim on the high school teams and go on to nationals for Special Olympics. So, I mean, I think there are swimming needs in our city, for sure.
Well, and remember, 80% of our residents in Oshkosh do not have kids in school. It's only 20%. So you cannot pass this just with moms and dads who have kids in school.
Right.
So that means it needs to be of value to as broad of a swath of our community as possible. So that's why the rec department's so important. That's why ASHI is so important. That's why everybody who's going to look at this and say, I'll either use it or it'll support something I'm doing that's similar elsewhere. Because I think your statement, what was it, you can only move at the speed of trust, or was it?
Yeah.
That was good. I wrote that one down. So because I really believe that the more groups you get in place, and that, you know, having looked at the referenda that we have passed since 2010, it's always been about trust. It's always been about how we can tie in as much of the community as possible to do this, because we're always stronger as we lift it together. But that means we need to listen to as broad a group as possible as we come up with a solution to it. So.
It might be 20%, but keep in mind, we got lots of grandpa and grandma influencers too.
That's right, that's right.
All right, so let's move on to site. We had 3 minutes last time. We have 20 minutes this time. I'm going to give kind of an abridged version of our presentation. Obviously, we've looked at the district property map enough times. Again, I think we briefly introduced this last time in terms of trying to determine kind of a rough size estimate. Again, roughly about 6.5 acres of land for the building. And again, if we follow city ordinance and provide every single parking space required, about 336 parking spaces Again, this doesn't take into account street parking, that doesn't take into account maybe being located next to another school, or combined with some of the other amenities that we've already talked about as well. So again, that's a very, very rough number in terms of size of land. Again, the goal tonight isn't to play realtor or isn't to play Zillow, which it's fun, I'll admit, it's very fun. But I think our questions are just, kind of a general ranking of where we think this would best serve the community and the school district and our partners. So again, this is kind of the same list we talked about or we looked at a little bit last time. Maybe this is also, do we sort of spread the pools out throughout the community? So if the 2Y facilities remain, does this fit somewhere else to serve a different part of the community? But again, I think the way, if we are looking at this as a 50-meter facility, likely it's as much of a destination, and that location will be very vital to its success in that regard as well. But it also has to serve our needs and Oshkosh needs as well. I think the other piece then is this attached to, how important is it that this is attached to the other indoor facility we've talked about? Is that the ideal scenario, or is that a negative? Is that putting too many of our eggs in one basket? Or is it essential because it kind of then any transportation we're providing is to one central location? So again, I'll kind of stop talking there. We'll give you guys about 10 minutes again to kind of have discussions. So again, not playing Zillow, but just kind of a ranking of those general areas. Should this be a standalone facility, or should this be connected either to, I think the indoor facility, in my mind, makes the most sense, or to another facility? So we'll leave those as our question. We're still deep in conversation. All right, we'll work in reverse order. So,
okay, well, I really like the idea of having the indoor facility and the aquatics facility together. I feel like as a high school student, I played at the Champion Center a lot for volleyball, and they have hockey there as well. And I feel like swimming would get a lot more attention, because I know sometimes we'll be off for a game, so we'll go and watch some hockey. So I feel like it would be nice to have just the schools together and volleyball and basketball, and you're all just in one place. It feels more like school.
Any other thoughts?
We found the location, sort of.
You got the location?
Oh, no, not really. We're going to brick over the river.
Okay.
John Highland used to say that all the time. The river's going to be covered up. No, there's some possibility. We're looking at, we're such a strange conglomeration here. You've got the festival grounds, which of course we don't own. But then the Rip Road property we do own, but that's sort of out there. And it's close to Winneconne. It's not close to Oshkosh. I don't know, if you build it, will they come? The businesses, or do we? So we don't really have a location. But what are we talking about this? Oh, right, we don't know. Yeah, oh, that's right. We're going to have the city, deed us the park they just built in front of Oshkosh Court. Beautiful property, isn't it?
Yeah, seriously. I'm with you.
I mean, we're talking, look at what's the motto on here? The motto is building community through education, right? I mean, or building education through community, right? But if we could, that would be better.
There's our goal.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, this group here.
We kind of agreed too that the aquatic center would probably be best located with the indoor athletic facility or next to it or whatever. We talked a lot about just the how Amy said it, just a lot of shared overriding costs, shared parking, shared this, shared that, concessions. And then one of the things that Jay brought up was, if we do that, what kind of acreage are we looking at?
Well, I think we talked when we kind of parsed down the indoor. We were thinking right around, I think it was 8 to 9 acres. and then you were sort of saying about 6.5 here, so, yeah, say 15 to 20.
So we're, yeah, we don't know, I don't know what the festival grounds, how big. So without knowing that, I can't.
Yeah, it's pretty big, I think.
Well, the festival grounds, when you see the for sale sign, it's actually the front section. And I don't know how many acres, the bulk of it behind currently is not for sale.
Drew, you've mentioned is it 60 acres that you think is for sale currently?
Festival grounds?
Yes.
Yeah, 66 acres, with a potential to get another 33,
Okay.
I believe it was. But the original 66 acres are, I believe list price right now, 10 million. And there's not gonna be a negotiation as far as the developer that has that property right now. He's firm on 10 million for that 66 acres.
All right. Group here?
I think we too kind of came to the consensus, it seemed to make sense to have co-located, just transportation, I think that would be a lot easier to figure out instead of running people all different parts of the community. Whether that be at a separate site or you're able to assemble land next to one of the schools, so you're only having to run transportation from one school over, but nearby each other.
Also, I think we were also going back to maybe an earlier meeting discussion about trying to keep things closer to the downtown, because then it would support the businesses as opposed to out by the highway, for example.
Subject matter?
I think we have some of the similar points, like the sharing facilities. We just have I just have a lot of questions, like how much are you looking at for the land, how many acres, like all that stuff just seems to get really big really fast, but we agree that it makes the most sense to keep it with the other indoor facilities. And then the transportation thing.
I talked about, you have that central location between two high schools. You have kids from both schools that need to get there. Whereas if you had it attached to the New West, which is coming up sooner, I'm the north coach, and I'm on the north side. I teach on the north side. When I was in high school, we traveled to a different pool. It wasn't that big of an issue, but it was a problem. But it's one of those things where, do you want to create a problem for both schools or a problem for only one school? So having it attached to the New West High School, to me, makes sense. I have no problem traveling over and figuring out the issue for my team, and then she doesn't have to worry about it at all. Or she could help me with it, whatever the deal is. But the thing of it just makes sense to create a problem for one team and not both, as far as the travel aspect.
We also had a question on the partnerships, the letter H there, like we were just sort of discussing, does that mean what we were discussing before with like getting the community buy-in sort of on all levels, or does that mean like we're gonna go to these organizations and ask for money / like are they gonna be, have access to the facility, so to speak? So we were just kind of wondering what that.
I think they're just hypotheticals right now. We don't know what partnership exists at this point in time. If UWO says, hey, let's do something together, and we have this wonderful parcel of land that works well for that, I don't know that we know what those are yet.
Thank you.
All right.
How many acres do we own at Riff Road?
26 or 30. It's 33.
What's-
33.
What's the value of that?
I don't know. Drew, what's the value of the Riff Road property and how big is it?
It's 35 acres. Value is kind of up in the air because it's in theory been on the market for multiple years, and I don't know what we can actually get. It sits in the middle of, surrounded by cornfield.
Mm-hmm.
That the guy actually farms and isn't interested in developing himself, so I'm not sure what kind of money we could get acreage-wise on that. My understanding is right now it's not very valuable as far as as a development kind of a property.
By the way, Nate was trying to find the Houghton Pool, but he did find there actually is one built in Beverly Hills that.
Okay,
So,
Nate.
I guess it's been done, I don't know.
Oh, no, that building's gone.
Yeah, I know, I was trying to find.
The old high school's gone.
I found pictures of the old outside of that high school.
Yeah, that building's gone. We built a new one when
I was kind of hoping that
when I
there'd be
was in high
some
school, so
archive of a
long
dark,
time ago.
dark picture. It could be black and white, that's okay, it doesn't.
Well, okay, not that one.
Well, I mean, just, when it was originally built or
We
something.
did have color film that.
Oh my goodness, I apologize.
All right, so May 2nd, we shift to outdoor competition amenities. So we will see you then. Thank you.